Hello, School Transportation Nation. It's Brian Gray, editor-in-chief of the magazine. Glad to be back with you. It's hard to believe we've been together, more or less, 119 consecutive weeks dating back to March of 2020. Boy, we've been through a lot, and that entire time, or just about, one of our good friends has been right beside us, Transfinder, the leader in school bus routing. They're bringing this episode to us, sponsoring it. So I want to thank them. A little bit later, we're also going to be sitting down with guest Stacey Hanke, author, communication, and influence strategist, who will be presenting a keynote address at STN EXPO in just a matter of days. So looking forward to that. But first, I'm flying solo today. We're busy getting ready for STN EXPO Reno. Plus, as we're recording this, we're putting to bed our August magazine issue. So a lot going on. But before we get into the interview with Stacy in a little bit, I want to touch on a couple of headlines. We've been talking a lot about, we're always talking a lot about budget and funding for transportation. And we've written about the situation out here in California, which is, California in a lot of ways is its own beast. But certainly in terms of getting kids to and from school, despite having the largest number of total student enrollment from public schools, California buses the fewest students per capita than any other state in the nation. We've talked a lot about state budget surpluses, not only in California, but in other places. And it seems that, more than seems, definitely, at least for the next couple school years, it looks like transportation in the Golden State is getting a huge shot in the arm. So going back to the 1980s, due to some propositions that were passed here by voters, funding shifted to essentially fully local control, which meant, transportation in California was grossly underfunded. So what resulted over the past couple of decades is cuts. Really, a lot of school districts in California are only doing the bare minimum, and that's what's required by the feds, namely students with individualized education programs under the Individual Disabilities with Education Act, and also some Title I funding as well, students that are experiencing homeless. So basically what's required by federal law. Well, that certainly seems to be changing. Just a couple of weeks ago, California passed its next budget. As I was mentioning, huge shot in the arm, $637 million ongoing Proposition 98 general fund to that home to school transportation local control funding formula. It's an add-on so that local education agencies can be funded up to 60% of their transportation costs. So still a lot of you out there saying, hey, heck, we're getting fully funded or 80%, but it was really pennies on the dollar. So just getting now 60 cents on the dollar is a big addition and a big help to a lot of California school districts, plus ongoing cost of living adjustments. So what we're looking to do here is developing a plan for all school districts to provide transportation funding services to their students, prioritizing low income and those in transitional kindergarten or TK. And that's regardless of where students live. So, this has a lot of operational aspects to it. Obviously, schools can't just overnight purchase a whole bunch of buses. What about, land is at a premium? Talked to a lot of student transporters about that. They certainly can't just, matriculate a bunch of new buses and place them in some new lot and some new facility. So it gives school districts, like I said, a lot to think about, along with that transitional kindergartner new state requirement. That's also a massive impact on the California educational system. So this is going to require the governing board to adopt a new plan on or before April 1st of next year to 2023 and have it updated by April 1st of each year thereafter. It also prohibits school districts from charging a fee for unduplicated pupils or providing service to students outside of boundaries. So basically this funding, again, when we're looking at state surpluses, that's right now. But as we know, with the economy as it is right now, we are hoping that we're not going to be going into recession soon. A lot of people think it's imminent. Others not so much. Obviously, inflation is going through the roof. So we're seeing a lot of state money being thrown at programs right now, which obviously it's a good thing. We want to get as many kids transported to and from school as possible. Hopefully, as much of those as possible on the yellow school bus. So certainly this is a big shot in the arm. But, in reporting on some of this throughout this year, the California State School Boards Association has, also signaled a red flag saying, hey, a lot of the legislative analysts are saying that we could, here in California, be running into a deficit as soon as 24, 25. So that's just right around the corner. So again, I think it's one of those conversations that student transporters all across the nation are continuously wary about funding and where it's coming from, how long it's going to last. Certainly, get the money now while you can, but it's really hard to plan for the future when you don't know if that money is going to be around. We're seeing this, cropping up in states all across the nation. There's a lot of initiatives right now that are developing additional program funds for zero or low emission school buses, in addition to the Clean School Bus Program that's out right now. The rebate applications are still open through August 19th for that from the EPA. But, we're seeing this in Michigan, certainly California, New Jersey, other states that are looking to utilize a lot of this surplus budget right now. Again, is it going to be available tomorrow? So that, I think, on one hand, it's a win. But like a lot of things, we got to really scrutinize these budget proposals or legislation and make sure that we have that rainy day fund, or at least a rainy day plan. And obviously, student transporters are so good at doing that. So just staying vigilant out there and, fighting the good fight. Also, too, coming up in our August issue, we're going to be looking at one element of the bipartisan infrastructure law that hasn't gotten a lot of press because so much of the attention has been on that Clean School Bus Program, that $5 billion over 5 years. Well, in that BIL, the U.S. Department of Transportation is directed to analyze and review safety technology that's used on school buses and around school buses for student loading and unloading. So think illegal passing video enforcement, think pedestrian detection systems, think lighting, think those aspects of that school bus stop that are designed to increase safety or make it safe so kids can get on and off the school bus safely. Well, part of that review, we still have not gotten official word from NHTSA yet. We have an article, like I mentioned, coming out in August. NHTSA, to this point, has not said what they're going to do with that review. We've obviously seen a lot of different PSAs done over the last several years at the federal level for school busing. That's going to be a part of this as too. But they're going to be really reviewing the effectiveness of some of these technologies. So it'll be interesting to see what comes with that. You can read more again when the magazine hits on August 1st. But NHTSA did announce last week that they are developing a state crash data system for states to feed into. That's part of this BIL as well. The agency originally had a comment period set to expire at the end of May, but extended that to this Friday, July 15th. So stakeholders out there who are looking at it from a state level and perhaps how school bus safety crash data is reported. So you want to head over to the federalregister.gov website, and you can comment on that docket. It's NHTSA, NHTSA 2022-0030. Again, comments need to be received by Friday, July 15th. We are so thrilled that our friends at Transfinder are going to be at STN EXPO Reno, July 15th through the 20th. And they usually aren't hard to find. Any frequent visitors of our trade show are sure to agree that the Transfinder group, they're the loudest ones in the hall. And they've got a lot to shout about these days. They want everyone in the industry to know about their award-winning trifecta. That's Route Finder Plus, the browser-based solution, Wayfinder, Transfinder's innovative driver app, and StopFinder, the industry-leading parent app. Plus is now more than 2 years old, and its proprietary artificial intelligence optimization is baked into it. There's also Form Finder and Chat Finder. You got to stop by their booth in Reno and find out what all these finders do and what they are. And make sure to vote for them in the Innovation Choice Awards held during the trade show. And if you can't make it to Reno, Well, you email that Transfinder team at getplus@transfinder.com. That's getplus@transfinder.com, or call 800-373-3609. They're looking forward to seeing you in Reno. All right, coming up next, I'm sitting down with Stacey Hanke, author, communication, and influence strategist, as well as keynote speaker at STN EXPO Reno. All right, we now have Stacey Hanke. Come on down. You're the next contestant on School Transportation Nation.
Hello.
How you doing, Stacey?
I'm good. Thank you so much for trusting me to do this and to share the message to your large organization. I'm honored to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we're only about a week out from seeing you in Reno. You're providing the keynote on July 18th, Influence Redefined. Be the leader you were meant to be, Monday to Monday. So before we get into that, this is the title of a book as well. Mm-hmm. So the keynote, that same title is a book that I'm reading as we were recording this. I'm reading it right now. I plan to have it done by the time you take the stage on July 18th. But really fascinating stuff. And essentially, without giving away too much, and I'll let you kind of wax on from there to describe it. But it's really about, we're all not as influential as we think we are. So with that said, where are you going with this book? How does it pertain to school transportation?
Mm-hmm. How it pertains is we all communicate, correct? And my promise to everyone that will be there on the 18th is really to increase their awareness, Ryan, of how they really come across rather than what they believe to be true. And that's what the whole Influence Redefined book is about. It's a model that I used over the course of the years with our clients to really help them identify, just because you feel a certain way when you communicate. And Ryan, I don't care if that's in your personal life, your professional life, cameras on, cameras off, and all the other mediums that we have to deal with. It's really getting people to be more aware of your feeling doesn't determine how influential you are. Your title, your level of experience, it all comes down to what your clients, whoever that customer, that listener, that client is, how do they perceive you? And on the 18th, we'll give people a chance to take a look, to really determine, okay, what works for me? What gives me the influence, whether it's my messaging or my delivery, and what's not working? To walk out of there and have practical how-tos of, what do I do now? How can I brush up on my skills?
One of the pieces of advice that you give in the book, and I know you're going to be talking about this next week, is to videotape yourself. Something that I was telling you just before we started recording. I do it and I hate it. I hate looking at myself. I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that hate looking at me too.
Yes.
But sometimes it's just cringe and see, oh my gosh, I look that way when I'm talking, and I have these facial expressions. It's just like, gross. But that's a big part of it, right? I mean, that's what you're telling these folks, and you've shared this message with Fortune 500 companies. I mean, to talk about just super high-powered CEOs. Really what it is, as you said, it's recognizing what works for you and it's consistent, right? How important is that consistency in messaging?
Yeah, I think the last 2 years have really proved this whole idea of consistency, where I'm seeing even our clients, they'll show up a certain way on Zoom and they show up differently when I know them in person.
Yeah.
Or our messaging, what we're saying doesn't match our body language, our delivery. And anytime any of that is off, Ryan, people start guessing who's going to show up. People start guessing, okay, which is the real you? Which one do I need to trust, have confidence in? Which one really has true knowledge? Consistency will be a big part of our conversation on the 18th. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of the whole leadership and why we target, a lot of these top executives, because they'll come to me, Ryan, and they'll say, no one tells me the truth. I reach a certain level in my career and people start saying, when I ask them, how did I do? Good, nice job. Well, you can't do anything with that feedback. And who's going to tell the CEO you take too long to get to the point? And a lot of their surprise when they work with myself or with my team is, why hasn't anyone said that to me? And when they can see themselves on the playback, that's why we do video playback. And all we do is we just have people use their phones. That's it. It's super simple to implement into your day-to-day routine. When they can see themselves through the eyes and ears of their listeners, now that's reality. Like these video and audio recordings, that's the perception your listeners have. And without that, if you're never recording yourself, you truly are making guesses off of either the false feedback that you get, the nice, good job, or you're basing your level of influence on how I feel. If I feel comfortable, I must be influential. Mm-hmm. There's a big disconnect there. The whole videotaping and audio taping, we've been in business we'll celebrate 20 years next month. And it's been a tool that I've used from day one because I can tell a CEO what I think, but that's just my opinion. When they can see how everyone else is experiencing them, that's when commitment starts to happen.
You tell a really cool story at the beginning of Influence Redefined about an executive who's hurrying off to the airport or something and jumps in the limo and has to take a phone call with a client and they're going to close a deal and talking away, hangs up, and the limo driver turns around and says, basically, does what you suggest that we need. This random stranger, he's basically, providing this service, and he turns around and tells this high profile executive everything that he's doing wrong. And he does it in a nice way, right? And then, to your point, the guy's knee-jerk reaction is be like, "Who are you?
Yeah,
like you're the limo driver." But then I think he starts kind of taking that to heart, and it really, hits home when he sees you, because at some time after this happens, he sees you and it all comes together for him.
Yeah. It's so great. And I think we all fall into that trap. He was in the limo or the cab at the time, Ryan. He was on his phone with a client. And when he finished the call with the client, that's when the driver turns around and says, "Can I give you feedback?" Well, you can imagine just a stranger saying that to you. And that's when he was like, what is this guy possibly going to tell me? Well, the driver went on to say, when you first got into my car, I thought you had executive presence or something like that. I don't know word for word right now. But when I heard you on that call, I started to second guess your level of credibility. You say and a lot. You take too long to get to the point. And there was another point that he made. And by that time, they had reached the airport where the driver was taking my client. And my client just slams the door, leaves, is literally on fire. You can imagine. Until he took a moment and realized, I think I just got a gift. Mm-hmm. And when feedback truly is constructive and it goes beyond the good, nice job. And I'll talk about this on the 18th of how do you prepare for that? How do you make sure you ask the feedback that you're going to be able to develop off of? When people specifically say to you, this needs work on, or here's where you come across strong, here where it was tough to follow you, then you've got a baseline, right? You've got a baseline on where do I go next? Mm-hmm. But without that, we just walk around life, Ryan, and I'm guilty of it. I've done it where we go off of what people say, just to be kind, or we strictly go off of, I feel good, so I must be good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder how much, at least I'm speaking for myself, the rare times I receive accolades for something, and it's, if it's something that maybe I already have that like voice in the back of my head that I'm like, yeah. And someone's like, oh, you did it. That was great. And you're kind of thinking, oh, and you nod and, oh, thank you. And you try to be appreciative, but maybe it comes from, I was a musician in another life, and I played in bands when I was younger, and it's kind of that self-doubt of like an artist where, folks are like, oh my gosh, that was so great. And you're like thinking, oh, but I messed up this part, or, which no one else knows.
Right.
So it's kind of, it's almost kind of like looking at it like that and being like your own like biggest critic. Yes. But a lot of times, to your point, folks just get blinded by the success sometimes. And they think, oh, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is good. I'm doing great. And, how much is it creating that safe zone in your organization so that you can foster that true feedback from your employees, say?
Yeah. And well, it's a cultural thing too, right? Mm-hmm. When I will mentor a CEO or part of his executive team, I share with them, you will change how people follow you. You'll change the dynamic of your team if you focus on your development first. And I know it sounds so common sense, Ryan. You'd be surprised, though, on the amount of individuals sometimes, if they're told that they should attend our session or come to our session, the initial comment is, what could you possibly tell me? I've been communicating for years. And that's where I go to the place of, you really need to think like an athlete. I live in the heart of Chicago, so Michael Jordan always comes to mind. or whoever it is that comes to mind for you, those individuals are good because of the consistency in focusing on their craft. It's the constant practice. And I'm not sure why in the corporate world, where some of us, we impact people's budgets, we impact people's lives, their finances, their morale, why we don't focus on our development first before we try to take care of everyone else. And that's really where my drive comes in to say, you can be experienced, you can be knowledgeable in your industry, but this part of how you come across and how people experience you, what you leave behind after an interaction, that's what's really going to make the impact of how much influence do you really have.
Absolutely. And I thought you were going to say Michael Jordan comes over for lunch all the time. And
I wish.
But to your point, like in the book, you talk about athletes and that whole mindset that they're always continually trying to get better. Like I was mentioning with like my musician analogy, kind of your own worst critic. How can you improve? You mentioned in the book where they're constantly practicing, they're reviewing tape, they're watching tape all week leading up to the game, watching what they did, their tendencies, the tendencies of their opponent, all to continuously get better. So I'm curious now, how did you get involved in studying influence? Let's go back a little bit. You said you've been doing this for 20 years. Yeah. So that makes you you were doing this in high school, I guess. But
kind of was. Kind of.
Yeah. How did you get started? What was kind of the impetus to make you get interested in how people exert their influence?
Yeah, it really, my first job out of college was radio. I was doing commercials for a local radio station. I remember how long it would take to record a commercial, Ryan, because it was not just my voice, it was everything they couldn't see, my behaviors. So that kind of triggered something where I realized, wow, I thought it was good, yet when I listened to it, it sounds awful. Made my way to several larger corporations where I was always in training and development. And my topics were everything from customer service to team building. I trained on everything, right? I probably shouldn't have, but that was my task. It always came down to, well, I could train a leader, customer service, but if they can't even communicate, does it really matter what I give them around customer service? And it was just this path over the years and a number of stops in the corporate world where I was doing training and really listening to leaders and watching those that would have this impact on their teams. And the whole team was polished, incredible, versus another team I thought, God, you can't trust anyone on that team. And I started to realize it really is how that leader or even team members, how they show up every day, how they stay showed up, and what they leave behind. But all of that, Ryan, has to be consistent, because there's nothing worse than you see a leader in a meeting or whomever in a meeting, and then you walk out of that meeting and you hear them down the hallway completely saying something different or behaving differently. It really was just watching from afar where I realized there's something here. This isn't, there's tons of presentation skills companies out there and nothing against them. When I looked at it, I thought, well, why would I teach someone how to stand up on a stage and present when that's not happening every day? But we are presenting ourselves every day and creating our brand. That's really how this whole idea of influence started to happen. Then doing it for a couple of years, the first 3 years, I realized, wow, we don't give each other feedback. And especially in the corporate world, leaders don't get feedback in the way that my team and I presents it. And it really goes back to that golf coach or that tennis coach who really takes it apart, pulls apart your swing, brings you back to a baseline, because going back to that baseline and taking on the new skills and recommendations will get you so much farther than where you were pre-golf lesson.
Absolutely. And I think whether it be a coach, finding a mentor, someone that you can trust, and again, sometimes that could be maybe somebody who works for you, where you can really take them aside and you trust what they say and you take to heart what they say because you know that they have your best interests in mind. So, Stacy, where can everyone find you? Your website, StaceyHankeInc.com, correct? So that's Stacy with an EY, Hanke, HANKEINC.com. You have some other reading material, some resources as well.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, what folks can find on your website.
Yeah. Our goal is to be a resource, even if it's from afar and I never meet half the people that are following us. There are all of our social media sites for you to get connected there. Every 2 weeks, I do a really quick video blog that has tips and recommendations to constantly be growing your influence no matter what type of conversations that you're having. We have quite a few complimentary white papers. We partner every year with the Social Research Lab, and they're out of the University of Northern Colorado. We pride our work on actual research to make sure that what we're teaching is in line to what's going on out there. So there's a lot of free complimentary white papers that people can just sign up and pull it off the website.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Well, really looking forward to that keynote on July 18th, and you should be too, School Transportation Nation. You can still register on site at the Peppermill Resort Hotel for the STN EXPO Reno starting July 15th, and learn about all of our upcoming shows at stnexpo.com, especially the upcoming TSD conference scheduled for November 8th through 13th. Registration is open. You can go directly to tsdconference.com and sign up today. Thanks again to our sponsor, Transfinder. Again, appreciate the support. Visit stnonline.com for the latest on everything going on in the school bus industry. Stay tuned for coverage on STN EXPO 2. Remember, you can find this School Transportation Nation podcast at stnpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Stream, follow, and tell your friends. Thanks a lot, all. Hope to see you in Reno, and if not, we'll catch you on the flip side. Be safe.